Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Alina Islam, and I'm a mining analyst here at Red Cloud Securities. I'm very pleased to introduce Latin Resources to you today, a company developing a world-class lithium deposit at its Salinas project in Brazil. For the webinar today, we have with us Tony Greenaway, VP Operations. Tony will provide an introduction to the company, including an overview of activities currently underway at Salinas. After the presentation, we'll take your questions live. Please send us your questions via the chat box, and we'll get through as many as we can. Before we get started, I do need to mention the fine print. For Latin Resources, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this webinar. I would direct listeners to the cautionary note on page 2 of the Latin Resources corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities, I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this webinar does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. Please see our most recent research located on our website for Latin Resources specific disclosures. With that, I'll hand it over to you, Tony. Please take it away.
Great, thanks, Elena, and look, thanks for Red Cloud for facilitating this webinar, and to everyone that's online, welcome, and it's my pleasure to sort of walk you through where we're at with our project. This is just the disclaimer and cautionary statement that Elena mentioned. So we've been fairly busy at our Salinas project in Brazil over the last 12 months. We've been drilling fairly heavily around the Colina deposit and the southern tenements that you can see on the slide there. Just as a bit of background, this project is located in the state of Minas Gerais in Brazil. It's a very well established mining jurisdiction with 300 operating mines in that region. It's Brazil's third largest economy. Certainly, from an infrastructure perspective, it's very well positioned or serviced. We have hydro or green power servicing the region. That certainly will be what we'll be taking advantage of for the project itself. It's very cheap, and we're talking 2 to 3 cents a kilowatt hour, which is fantastic. We have water nearby, so water for the process facility is available, although we are using dry stack tailings, so no tailings dams. There's no chemicals involved in our project and things like that, which is a very big environmental constraint or concern for operations in Brazil. We have a very large bulk facility port located about 380 kilometres away from us, and we're well serviced by main roads and highways, and in fact about 10 kilometres from the project itself we have the main the main highway that heads out to that port of Ilhéus. So where we are, it's fantastic. It's very well serviced, as I said, and we have the great support of our local government at Salinas. We have a lot of people on site, about 300, I think, all up, working on the project, a lot of whom have moved into Salinas or from the town. So it's really good to have that, and certainly something that is really encouraging for us to have that support, both locally and the state government level, which is fantastic. We started drilling this project back in February of last year. We put our maiden resource out at the end of last year. That was 14 million tonnes. We've had 10 rigs on site drilling away for the full year this year. I think we've just clicked over 67,000 metres of diamond core that we've completed on the project, which is fantastic. We upgraded the resource in June of this year to 45 million tonnes, and we're very pleased to have just updated that again just recently to where we stand currently at just over 70 million tonnes at 1.3% lithium. That resource is a whole of project resource. You can see it's made up of 2 separate deposits there. The Colina deposit is our main deposit, it's our flagship that we've been sort of working on. That's where the majority of drilling has gone in. And you can see that sits at 63.5 million tonnes at 1.3, and very pleased to have our maiden resource out for Fogs Block, which is about 12 kilometres to the southwest of Colina. You can see that's only small at the moment, about 7 million tonnes at just on 1%. But bear in mind that's got, I think, based on 9 drill holes as opposed to 190 at Colina. So there's a big difference in terms of the advancement of those two projects. But to be able to declare a maiden resource for FOGs was a really good result for us. And I guess is testament to the quality of the data that we're producing, and just these ore bodies in general. They're very consistent. They're very easy to model. What's also really encouraging for us was the exploration target range that SGS declared for FOGs block. And you can see that there at the bottom of that slide. They're predicting that there could be up to 18 million tonnes sitting down there at that FOGs district. So that's a real game changer for us. You know, if we can get to that point, that puts us well over the 80 million tonnes as a global potential for that project. And that's really where we were sort of targeting to try and be at. Our view of a tier 1 asset is the ability to be able to produce 100,000 tonnes of LCE per annum. And that equates back to about 1 million tonnes of concentrate per annum. So again, that sort of puts us through to about a 70 to 80 million tonne resource base to sustain that over a meaningful life of mine. So we're there, which was great. So a fantastic result for us. And there's more to come with things like Planalto and Salinas South and other bits and pieces that we're looking at. So the resource itself, you can see the footprint of Colina there. It's now grown to about 2.5 kilometres long from northeast to southwest, and still constrained within our structures that we've identified at about 1 kilometre wide. So it's a very big ore body. It will continue to grow. You can see that we have untested to the southwest, and we've found the third pod of mineralisation. It's just starting to develop separately from Colina, but we put a wildcat hole down into a prospect called Planalto. That was completely blind. There's no outcrop there. It was just a structural interpretation that we had based on geophysics, and we intersected over 45 metres of pegmatite in that hole, which was great. So what that means for us is that our corridor is now very real. We know that we're going to have more mineralisation coming. So whilst we're significant with a 70 million tonne resource already, we will continue to grow that over 2024 when we continue to drill. One of the things that really came out in this latest update was the increase in grade when we moved into the measured resource. You can see there we've only got 1.7 million tonnes in measured. It's up significantly from where it was, but interestingly enough, and really encouragingly, we've increased the grade to nearly 1.5% when we move into that measured resource. We've actually seen that phenomenon whenever we do infill drilling. So if we go from inferred up to indicated, we see a lift in grade as well. And then we go from indicated to measured, we see another lift. So the closer space we drill this, we're not increasing the tonnage, but we are increasing the grade, and that's a really good thing to see. So the next 12 months for us is going to be drilling around Colina and other prospects, but the first quarter of next year is going to be very much focused on infill drilling of that Colina deposit to bring more of that inferred material up into the measured and indicated categories, so we can then look at conversion across into reserves as part of the DFS. So again, if we continue to see that trend in grade increase with closer space drilling, we should see the grade of the overall deposit lift again, which is really nice. The image on the right hand side there is FOGs block. As I said, it's very early days, so that you can see the number of holes that we've used to generate that. That's all inferred at the moment, but we will continue to be drilling down at FOGs block, and there's plenty of potential there as defined by the exploration target range. So encouraging signs for the deposit in terms of grade. More to be had when we have discoveries like Planalto. So watch this space for next year as we continue to advance this project. This is the deposit looking at a 3D image of Colina. You can see those sort of east dipping pegmatites there. We're mapping and modelling 30 separate pegmatites within Colina. And on the right-hand side, or sorry, the left-hand side of that image, you can see the start of what we believe is the third pod of mineralisation within that corridor. So Colina itself is actually two separate blocks of mineralisation, or clusters of pegmatites, if you like. And as I said, we think we've now hit the third one, which is the Planalto pegmatites that we've hit down there. So again, just a breakdown of that Colina resource: 1.7 million tonnes at 1.47 in the measured, 39 million tonnes at 1.3 in the indicated, and 22 million tonnes at 1.2. So certainly very robust resource. Lots of room to increase that and improve that as we go. We've got 41% of it at the moment, 41% increase again from our last resource. So we're seeing that really nice step up and increase as we continue to explore and to drill, and we expect to see that carry on into 2024. This is the Fogs Block 3D image. You can see that, again, it's only fairly small at the moment and it's open in both directions. It is a bit lower grade, and that's really a factor of our shallow drilling. We're only drilling down to a couple of 100 meters at the moment down hole. So whilst the ore body outcrops, there is weathering at the surface, and you can see that in that model. The green and blue colors there, slightly lower grade at above 0.5, but as we go deeper, you can see it switches across to the yellows and oranges and reds, which are the plus 1% grade through there. So as we see at Colina, we have a weathered zone at the top where we get depletion of grade, but as we drill down into the fresh material, those grades are up around that 1.5%, 1.2 to 1.5%. So we expect to see that trend to continue as we go drilling more at Fogs Block, which, as I said, will be certainly a target for us next year. Just a couple of sections, you can see them there, and the top image there really clearly shows that these sort of clusters of pegmatites at Colina itself. You can see the original ore body that we had, that was our 14 million tonne resource in the Colina pegmatite cluster. We then sort of stumbled onto the southwest cluster that you can see there, and that really makes up, those two make up our 63 million tonne resource that we have right now, and then the start of our third cluster right off on the left hand side of that top image there. So our model of these pegmatites being constrained within a structural corridor is very valid, and we see potential for more of these clusters to develop. Certainly Planalto is showing that very clearly. Colina itself is still open at depth. You can see on the bottom two images there, the one on the left-hand side is a section through Colina itself. You can see the pegmatites are open at depth, but we're getting sort of to the point where we're looking at a pit at the moment of around about 260, 270 meters depth. So when I can find pegmatites closer to surface, I probably won't chase these too much deeper. There is potential for underground operations at some point in the future, but certainly it's not a focus for me right now. When we, again, I said we can get shallow tons along strike at things like Planalto, we'll certainly go ahead and chase those as opposed to drilling deeper holes and going down dip. The bottom image on the right hand side there is a section through Fogs Block. You can see only two holes there, and that very clearly shows in there the weathering effect near a surface, and as we get deeper down, the grades increase. These prospects or the pegmatites at Fogs are open along strike and at depth, so we will continue to grow that as we move into 2024. So the focus for us next year is very much going to be in the first part of the year, infill drilling at Colina. So we need to get to probably 75 by 75 meter drill spacing to get us up into indicated, and 50 by 50 to get us to measured. So we've got a big program of that. We're actually increasing the number of rigs on site next year to 16. So it's going to be a very busy year for us again. So looking to drill at least at the same amount of drilling that we did this year, so 65,000 meters. That'll look to drag Colina up into reserve status, and then we'll switch our focus back to more exploration and target things like continuing to drill at Fogs Block, but also down at Planalto, as I said, which is a very high priority target for us, given it's only sort of 1.5 kilometers away from Colina itself, so very near where our proposed process facility, etc., will be. Our DFS is very much on track. So we've set up a development committee. We have all of our people on staff now, and looking to expand that team a little bit. All of our contractors are on board. So DFS is well on track for delivery by mid-2024, and that's really been sort of starting in earnest a couple of months ago, and will continue into 2024. This is an image from the PEA. You can see the original open pit that we had proposed there for the PEA and the mineralisation contained within that. We are still proposing that Colina will be developed in a single open pit operation. It's slightly larger than that pit is there now, obviously with the extensions to the southwest. And that mine infrastructure that you can see there, that waste dump, has to move, because that's right where Planalto is. So you can see how close that Planalto prospect is to the main Colina ore body. The mine infrastructure in the background will sort of be shuffled around as well. This was a very preliminary design that we did on the back of the PEA. The DFS will obviously go into final details and positioning of all the infrastructure, etc. But the plant layout, or the mine layout, will be very similar to this, but obviously just reshuffling things to make sure that everything sort of fits. We will obviously be looking to increase the resources that were included in the PEA. You may recall, for those who've been following the story, that our PEA was only based on 26 million tonnes of our 45 resource base, and that was due to a number of constraints that ASX put on us when looking at PEAs in terms of inferred resources. That will change for the DFS. As I said, obviously we're looking to do a whole lot of infill drilling to bring most of that resource up into the measured and indicated. So we expect that resource base to grow significantly for the PEA. Just as a bit of a reminder at what the economics of this project look like, and again, bearing in mind, this is based on a 26 million tonne resource base only. So when we grow our measured and indicated, up to anywhere from 40 to 50 million tonnes is what I'm targeting, these numbers will change significantly. That said, they're already very robust. You can see an NPV of 3.6 billion, an IRR of 132%, 7-month payback period, 12.6 billion in life of mine revenue, and 6.8 billion in free cash. At the moment, the project for the PEA is an 11-year mine life, but again, as I say, when we're increasing our resource base up to where I'm hoping to get it to, we'll certainly see that the life of mine increase, and also we'll probably look at increasing the throughput of the project as well. All-in sustaining costs at the moment are just over $530, and capex for the stage 1 is 253 million. So when we looked at the PEA for this, we sort of designed it in 2 stages. The first stage, which you can see the economics for there, is based on a total nameplate of 500,000 tonne per annum of concentrate output. That was based solely on that smaller resource. Now that we're up around the 70 million tonnes, we can certainly consider and looking to bring in stage 2, which effectively doubles that output, which is where we want to get to. At the moment, it's very sustainable where we are, but with a new resource base, and we'll obviously crunch all those numbers in the DFS, we're hoping that we can show that it's very clearly sustainable at stage 2, which then puts us into a tier 1 producer, which is where we want to be. In terms of the timeline for where we're at, you can see we've hit all of our milestones when we said we were going to, and we're certainly planning on continuing to do that. Our JORC resource, or the second upgrade, has just come out in the second half of this year. I'll continue to do that, so I'll put in a new resource probably end of the first quarter of next year. That will be more, as I said, an increase in the JORC classification of Colina itself, as opposed to resource growth. But we will continue to drill. As I said, we've got 16 rigs on site for next year. So we'll be very aggressive in our drilling program, looking to continue to expand that resource. Our met test work is well underway. We've already done a number of studies, but the main block of work is about to kick off. I've actually got 3 tonne of material here in Canada, up at SGS at Lakefield. We're building composites right now to do the major bulk sample runs through the DMS processing plant. And we're also looking at some other things like ore sorting and other processing as well that will go into the DFS process. The PEA is out and complete, the numbers I just showed you. The DFS is, as I said, well and truly on track for delivery by mid next year. Our environmental permitting, again, is well on track. All of the studies are completed earlier this year, so we're compiling documentation and we're starting to submit now. We should have all of that finished and submitted by mid-2024. And then with our fast track priority status, we get approvals through in 6 months, which is what the Ministerialised government have promised us. So by the end of 2024, we should have fully permitted mining licenses, environmental permits to go ahead. The DFS will be finished. We'll make final investment decision at that point and look at starting construction in 2025. Now you can see there we've got about an 18-month construction and first production in mid-2026. That's about 18 months build time and ramp up. We're basing that on our peer down at Sigma. They've shown that can be done in Brazil, so we're not too dissimilar to the way we'll set things up at Sigma. So we think it's a realistic time frame to do so. Again, all of our DFS guys are on board, so we think that's very achievable for us. Again, we're fully funded, and I'll show you some economics of where those company snapshot is in just a minute. But what we're also planning to do is to do some early works. We topped up our cash, so we're sitting at about 65 million at the moment in the bank. And the reason for that was, one, so I can do more drilling, but secondly, more importantly, is that we can do some pre-works to make sure that we're in the beginning of 2025, we can hit the ground running. And that means things like, ordering long lead items. We can do road upgrades, power upgrades. We can get all of that infrastructure ready so that when we start commissioning and building in 2025 and 2026, we've got that basic infrastructure ready for us to go. So there are some early works that we'll look at doing at the back end of 2024. Snapshot of where we are. You can see the share prices come back a little bit, as have everybody, with the lithium prices sort of softening a little bit over the last few months. But we're well positioned with 65 million in the cash in the bank. A market cap at just over 500 million, and we are very much focused on driving this project forward. We've got a very clear pathway ahead of us. We know the work that we have to do, so we're just getting on with the business of building this project. When we look at longer term pricing and things like that, we're very comfortable with where we are. And again, as you may recall, we use 1,600 or 1,700 as a base price for our PEA, so very conservative numbers there. So we see that as a realistic long-term price for spodumene concentrate. So again, we're very much focused on just bringing this project into development now. These are the important guys. This is my team on site. We have a fantastic group there that is led by Pedro, Rodrigo, Rangel, and Bruno. Some fantastic geos, fantastic people on site, and these are the guys that are working their bums off to get the job done. So I really can't thank them enough for the work they've done this year, and we're all looking forward to a very busy next year. So that's pretty well where we're at. So happy to take now any questions.
Thanks a lot, Tony. So we can get started on the Q&A portion of the webinar. Just as a reminder to our participants, you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. So Tony, a couple of questions here. Any plans for, or already underway, I don't know if you have exploration already underway, to generate new targets on the property?
Yeah, very much so. So we've very much been focused on the bottom part of the tenement package there. We have a very large tenement package to the north of us. We've pegged that just recently, and it was very cheap to get into. It was open ground. And we pegged that on the basis of our understanding of the controls to mineralisation. So I've got a dedicated regional exploration team led by Bruno. Got some very good geologists working for him, 3 separate teams, and they're out mapping, doing target generation all the time. These are the guys that found Fogg's Block. These are the guys that planned Planalto and things like Virginia and Salina South. So we have already a pipeline of prospects that we will look to get into 2024. But that said, we're not resting on our laurels at all. We are looking to expand to the north of us, where we know we've got more prospective ground. We've just got to get time to get into that, and we're starting to do that preliminary mapping and geophysical interpretation now. But we're always looking for new prospects, new ground as well. The guys in the project generative side of things are very active and very driven to look for the next Colina. We know there are more of them out there. We think we understand very well what we should be looking for and where we should be looking. So very much that's part of what we do.
Okay. So I know you and I talked about this earlier, but maybe for the benefit of our audience, can you talk about that mineralized corridor that's between Colina and Planalto and what the drilling plans are for that?
Sure. So yeah, look, we've had this model and this theory of a mineralized corridor or a structural corridor that's constraining our mineralization. All of the work, and we've got 200 holes into this area now. All of it is diamond drilling. All of it is oriented diamond drilling. So we have a massive structural data set, and that really helps us with targeting new areas. We've flown geophysics over these, over the full area. We're very, very detailed. So we can see structures that control to mineralization. You can't see the pegmatites themselves, they're not magnetic, but what you can see is the structures. So within that corridor, we can see lookalikes for the Colina, structural environment. And Planalto was a test of one of those areas. So one hole in the middle of nowhere, and we hit 45 meters of pegmatites in that. So it's a really good test of that. The interpretation that we had. So we're really pleased with that. We have more prospects to go to, more of those targets to go and test. But certainly as of January, we'll be back at Planalto. As I said, that's about 1.5 kilometres away from Colina itself. So right in the middle, I guess, of where you've got a process plant in Colina and then Planalto. So it makes sense for us to focus on that. We'll do some systematic step out drilling from Planalto itself, certainly chasing it up dip and then along strike. And from what we can see, we're quite bullish on that prospect. We're hoping that it will evolve into another Colina sort of size. But even if it's only half as big, that certainly significantly adds to the resource space that we have right there around where our process facility will be. So it's a big focus for us, and we'll continue to be exploring. Probably the first quarter of next year has got to be dominated by infill drilling on Colina itself, so we can get that into reserve status. But I'm an explorationist at heart, so I always want to keep finding new deposits and new mineralisation. So I'll be pushing as hard as I can to get those rigs back out and looking at that. But we will maintain an exploration focus, not just as strong as we have been for the last 12 months. Okay,
so you touched on met work. How long do you think that's going to take?
Yeah, so we've built building the composites right now. As I said, we've got 3 tonne of material up here at Lakefield, and that includes some waste material, so we can do fully diluted test work as well. So they will be built in December, and then we'll kick that test work off in January. So January, when everything starts off again in the new year, we're expecting that to be sort of 2 to 3 months worth of work, and then results flowing off into the DFS from that. But we've got to bear in mind that we've already done a significant amount of met test work, and includes sort of benchtop HLS work as well as a couple of DMS runs. So really, we're very confident of what the recovery and how this material will process. Really now we're just doing what's it look like at a scale up. We're not expecting any real different results from this. It's more just to confirm the results that we've had already. But certainly this material processes very well. We're now looking, as I said, to do some things like some ore sorting to improve our recoveries again, which are already very good. On a global scale, they're sort of up there with the best of them, green bushes and what have you. So we're certainly very confident of the work that we've done, and getting this last bit done before the full end of the DFS is important, but we're not expecting to have any surprises out of that.
Okay. All right. I think that's it for questions, Tony.
Right.
Thanks a lot for hosting this webinar with us today.
My pleasure.
Just as a reminder for our participants, our next webinar will feature Barton Gold, and that's tomorrow, December 14th at 11 a.m. Eastern. Thanks for tuning in with us, everyone. Have a great day.
Great. Thanks, everyone.